For my raised road, I'm going to use Styrofoam board, which will make the highway, the blacktop, a little bit higher than the rest of the adjacent fields. To do this, I've set my combination square to 4.5 inches. We'll make a mark and cut with an X-Acto knife. I'm cutting the Styrofoam board with a sharp X-Acto knife. Now it's time to glue down what will be our road. And now we're adding some weight to make sure it adheres well. I'm not too concerned about making sure that the lines and everything match up perfectly because I want to use some of the inconsistencies in my foam board to replicate what the actual road would look like in real life. To accomplish the road ditch effect, I took my 900-watt soldering iron and bent a piece of wire, copper wire, into a loop, then placed it in the iron. And I'm melting a groove on either side of the road to resemble the look that I want. This works pretty well for the minimal amount that I'm doing. If I were to replicate this process again, I would try another method. Not knowing any better, this was the best idea I came up with. And we're done. The process overall has been fairly inconsistent as everything is by hand, and I did find that holding the wire with a needle nose helped me stay steady as I went through the styrofoam. For the experiment, I'm satisfied that it works. To make my shoulder on both sides of the road and to fill in any gaps that I don't like in the styrofoam, I'm using perfect plaster, 2 heaping cups to 1 1/3 cups water, and I will mix that and spread it along these edges. I'm going to start with 1 cup first and then add more as I need. Using the recipe they recommend, this is too runny for my purpose, so I'm going to go ahead and add more plaster to it and then not add the rest of the water. What I'm doing with the trowel is putting a little bit of the plaster on the end of the trowel and then just working it into the edge of the road. Not having done this before, I'm just working and learning out the technique that works. Once I have my plaster along the edge the way I want it, I'm going to come back and just put a nice angle on it. All of the plaster that's left in the road ditch, I'm going to come back and wipe off with my finger. And then spread the rest of it out in the lower parts of the ditch. We're going to cover this up with static grass and other things as we go. And anything we don't like that's standing out, we can sand with a little bit of sandpaper. And I have a couple low spots here. I'm going to go ahead and fill in while I'm at it. And smooth those out. It doesn't have to be perfect, as road ditches are typically imperfect. And some of the gouges that I made earlier, those have now been filled in. Again, those will be covered up with static grass and other material as we go along. And we also have the illusion of a shoulder now coming off the edge of our highway. For an experiment over here in this area, I'm actually adding quite a bit more plaster down the edge of the road ditch to give it a more gradual look all the way down. So the shoulder will actually fade into the ditch. What I'll do here is I'm going to lay a layer of dirt along the road edge and then down through the ditch and onto what will be a field. The paint will give the dirt a nice earthy flavor or color wherever the dirt doesn't really adhere very well, and what will show through is this brown color. I'll lay down a generous helping of paint and then apply the soil over top of it. While I'm here, I'm also going to paint the edge of the layout to dress it up and make it look nice. Now that I have my base of paint down, what I will do is take some soil and run it through my strainer. That seems to help spread it a little more evenly across the paint. And this is just dirt that I sifted out of a field north of my house. I went out there earlier in the fall and then dug up some dirt, ran it through this to screen out any large chunks and leaves and whatever else was in the field, and then put it in a bucket to take home. I'm putting down a pretty generous helping of dirt as well over the paint because, one, the soil is priced right, it's free, and I can always vacuum up what I don't use. You'll notice here there's some paint bleeding through the soil. You can go ahead and add more soil to those areas, or you can leave it because we're going to put some static grass and other things on top, which will hide that, but we do want that earthy color underneath the soil. It's time to paint the road the color that I want it. What I'm going to do is tape both sides of the road, and then I'm going to use paper to protect the rest of the layout from any excess paint. I found this textured spray paint something that looked interesting, and it does give the appearance of a typical blacktop I might find in Kansas, and that's the look I'm going for. Let's begin taping. I'm keeping the blemishes in the foam board to make it look natural, and it incorporates right into the storyline. I'm going to let this dry, then I'll come back and add one more coat where it's needed. You'll notice I applied it too heavy in a few spots. The natural imperfections of state highways here in Kansas kind of allow me to make a few mess ups and still have it look realistic. We've taped out to make the white lines on the sides of the road. Now I want to do some yellow stripes down the center of the road. Now this is just going to be a dashed line because this is a flat plane, so there's no reason to have no passing lanes or anything like that. The road is 4 1/4 inches wide, so I'm measuring 2 1/8 inches on center every so often to give myself a nice straight place to put my center line. Now there's no hard and fast rule as far as I know on how wide these stripes should be. It looks like they're about 3 to 4 inches wide when you're driving down the highway. So I'm just going to make mine approximately 1/16 of an inch or so wide. And I am eyeballing the width of this line. I'm not measuring it to be precise. In typical Kansas fashion, if you're on one of the county roads or some of the less traveled state type roads, you wouldn't see the lines being very elegant. So what I'm doing here is I cut some tape to approximately 3/8 inch wide. Then I'm using the square as a guide. So I will have a approximately 1/2 inch line every so often. Probably not accurate to real life, but for what I'm doing, this is going to be a great look. Then what I will do is I'm going to use a watered down solution. Well, I don't want the lines bright because these highways are not maintained quite that well. So I want the lines to look faded. Okay, now we're ready to apply white on both edges. Now we're ready to apply white on the edges and yellow down the middle. To apply the yellow stripes, I'm using turn signal amber. This is something I had on hand by Model Masters, and I will just put that in all the spaces that are black. To paint the white stripes on this road, what I'm going to use is just some ordinary house paint. This is stuff I have on hand, so that's why I'm using it. If you haven't noticed the pattern already, I'm very, very hip on using things that you have. I don't expect guys to go out and spend a bunch of money on paint and supplies when sometimes what you have lying around the house will work just fine. So I'm just using a little bit of white house paint right here. I'm going to come back and weather this a little bit more so it looks natural and faded just like the yellow. So that is the plan here. And I'm not putting it down real heavy either. I'm kind of being stingy with the paint because, again, I want this to look faded, like good old Kansas blacktop that you might see about anywhere in the state, especially western Kansas where I'm from. Okay, I'm happy with that.